Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Pittsburgh Sports Memories podcast. My name is Tim Hannon, and with me is,
Steve Wirt.
hi, Steve.
Hey, Tim.
So, we wanted to do an episode on Barry Bonds' time in Pittsburgh. And Bonds, of course, is, I think, the single most polarizing sports figure of this generation. He's baseball's all time home run leader. You could make the argument maybe that he's the greatest ball player of all time. And at the same time, he is universally despised by fans, teammates, the media, just about everybody else. He, of course, spent the first part of his career here in Pittsburgh. And I think, Steve, like how some fans remember it is Barry Bonds was this great player. And then he left via free agency, which made everybody here hate him. Then he started using steroids, which made everyone everywhere hate him. But you know, his time in Pittsburgh and his relationship with the Pittsburgh fans, it was rocky long before he ever left town.
Yes, it was. He was always considered a little bit, I could say, like arrogant. Like he was not well liked in Pittsburgh.
So let's start with kind of Barry's early life. I think sometimes the best way to understand somebody is to look at their family of origin. So Barry Lamar Bonds was born in 1964 to Patricia and Bobby Bonds. Bobby was a great ball player, not a Hall of Fame ball player, but he has a decent case. In the history of baseball, there are only two people ever to have 5 seasons with 30 home runs and 30 stolen bases. And there's also only two people with 300 career home runs and 400 career stolen bases. Bobby Bonds is one of those two people. You know who the other one is, Steve?
How many home runs? 300?
300 home runs, 400 stolen bases.
I don't know. That's a good question.
It's Barry Bonds.
Oh, wow.
So
Nice.
Bobby and Barry, only two guys that have that.
Wow,
Uh,
father and son.
Father
Yeah,
and
I
son.
that's well, I mean, most people that steal bases, like Ricky Henderson, I doubt has very many home runs. Although I think Barry Bonds has more walks than Ricky Henderson now. And I think Ricky Henderson might be number two, but yeah, that's crazy that you know that Barry Bonds is the all time walk leader.
Yeah, yeah.
Nobody like threw him a pitch for like 10 years.
Right, right. Yeah.
I don't care how many steroids you do, you can't hit a ball that ain't in the strike zone.
very, very true. Very true. So Bobby Bonds, he plays minor league ball in the deep South in the 1960s, and that's obviously an interesting experience. He can't eat at the same restaurants as his white teammates, stuff like that. And when he gets called up to the Giants, he becomes close friends with one of his teammates, a guy named Willie Mays. Uh,
Say hey kid.
the
Yeah.
say hey kid. Mays is not
Now
only
this is
good.
when they're in San Francisco at this point, correct?
Yes, correct. They were in San Francisco. They'd
So
moved
they're
from New
not New
York in
York.
the
Okay.
50s, right?
Yeah.
And Willie Mays is not only good friends with Bobby Bonds, he also becomes the godfather of Barry Bonds. And from all accounts, seems like he wields a lot of influence on both of those guys. And Willie Mays, of course, one of the best ball players ever, one of the greatest sports figures, absolute legend. And at the time of this recording, actually is a living legend. Willie Mays still with us. And I try
I
to
think he
dig
has over
into.
600 home runs, doesn't he? He's
He
one of the
does.
few.
Yep.
I think it's like Pujols, A Rod, and him, like in Ruth and
Right.
Aaron.
And
That's
and
yeah,
yep, that's
Barry
right.
Bonds. Man. That's the
Yeah.
list.
Yep. Yeah. I try to dig into like what kind of person Willie Mays is, and there's all kinds of conflicting accounts. You get like, oh, he loved the game and he was a great teammate. You also get that he could be surly and conceited. There's an interview that he does with, I believe it was Dan Patrick later in his life, where he gets annoyed because Dan Patrick's asking him about current ball players, and he says, "I thought this interview was supposed to be about Willie Mays." So,
He talks about himself in the third person.
yeah. So I don't know. I mean, maybe
Tim,
he
I
was
thought
just.
this podcast was supposed to be about Steve Word.
And I, like stories like that, it's like you never know what the context is, right? I don't really know what kind of person Willie Mays is, but one thing people seem to agree on is that his experience coming up through the Negro Leagues means that he never really trusts either the media or the baseball establishment. And I can't say I blame him for that because, here's a group of people who early in his career they're saying, well, you're not even allowed to play with us because of the color of your skin. Then a few years later, when he's hitting all these home runs and making over the shoulder catches in the
Yeah.
World Series and subsequently making the team and the media money by generating interest in the sport, now all these same people seemingly love him. I mean, Willie Mays to me, he's Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Steve. Like can't play in any reindeer games. And it's like, and then all the reindeer loved him.
Yeah.
So I get why. If Willie Mays is bitter, I totally get why. And he apparently imparts that mistrust of people in baseball and the media to both Bobby and Barry. He teaches them you always have to look out for number one. So back to Bobby Bonds. Another important thing to know about Bobby is that he's an alcoholic, has been since high school. We mentioned that he was great, but not a Hall of Fame caliber player. Probably a big reason for that was his drinking. That's also reportedly the reason why the Giants got rid of him, and then he bounces around to like 7 different teams after that. Bobby gets very resentful of everyone around baseball. Barry Barry Bonds even gives some interviews in his early days with the Pirates about how Bobby was kind of estranged from the family and how he rarely ever saw him growing up. So his relationship with his dad was pretty strained. It's by all accounts when he was growing up. So that's all context for this episode, right? Think about how Barry Bonds grew up and what his image was of organized baseball. It's seemingly deprived him of a father. It's a place where people are just out for themselves. And in baseball and probably in life in general, the only person that can be trusted is you, and everybody else is the enemy. So I think if you can sum up one kind of overriding personality trait for Barry Bonds, it's resentment.
Fair enough. That should make for an interesting, interaction with media and fans. That's for sure.
Yes, it will. Going into the 1985 Major League Baseball draft, he is one of the top prospects. Even with kind of the turmoil at Arizona State, he's really good, and there's a lot of people in baseball who think, hey, this guy could pan out, and it's a pretty stacked draft. Steve, ready for some names of baseball players who got drafted in 1985?
I'll lay it on me.
Will Clark, Barry Larkin, John Smoltz, Rafael Palmeiro, David Justice, Bo Jackson, and Randy Johnson.
Wait a minute. Bo Jackson plays football, not baseball, too.
He actually played baseball, too. Fun fact.
Pretty good at baseball, too. Yeah.
Yeah. The 1985 draft class has the highest wins above replacement total of any class in baseball draft history.
That's
So,
crazy.
yeah, really, really stacked group there. The Pirates, with that 6th pick, they select Barry Bonds. And I went back to the Pittsburgh Press from the day that he was drafted. And it's amazing because right away there were concerns about his character. In fact, Baseball America's draft preview that day states that a lot of teams don't even have Bonds on their draft board because of said concerns. The Pirates have a bunch of scouts, and their West Coast scout, because he played at Arizona State, their West Coast scout is a guy named Jerry Gardner, and he's quoted in the press right around the time that Bonds is drafted. And he says that the team has investigated those concerns. And while they think Barry Bonds is maybe a little cocky, they don't have a problem with that. Jerry Gardner, the scout, he says, I'd be more afraid of the kid if he were timid. So careful what you wish for there, Jerry.
Well, you need some confidence. You definitely want some confidence, but
Yeah.
then it goes the other way.
Yep.
Yeah.
The general manager of the Pirates at this time is Joe L. Brown, who was their general manager for it was approximately, I don't know, 125 years. Felt like he was there forever. He's the general manager of the
I
draft.
remember Sid Thrift more than, yeah.
Well, yeah, this was Joe L. Brown. This was definitely the end of his his tenure,
His
but
pre-Sid Thrift, yeah.
right. But he's the one that drafts Bonds. And on the day that Bonds is drafted, Joe L. Brown makes this dubious prediction. He says, quote, he might steal 30 bases every year, but we don't project him as a home run hitter.
Yeah, whoops.
Yeah. Oops. I mean, to be fair,
700 and some home runs later.
yeah, yeah. To be fair, a lot of baseball people had the same idea. Bonds seemed like he would make a good leadoff hitter, maybe like a Lou Brock kind of player, but he wasn't going to be a power hitter. That seemed to be the consensus. So Bonds gets drafted by the Pirates in 1986. He starts in the minors, but he does pretty well. He's called up pretty quickly, but about midway through the 1986 season.
Yeah, I don't think he didn't even like spend hardly any time in the minors.
No, just a couple of months, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. In 1986, he hit 16 home runs. And again, remember, he only got called up halfway through the season. That is the most by a Pirates rookie since Al Oliver hit 17 in 1969. But he only bats 223 and he strikes out 102 times. So he's sort of one of these guys that, is just swinging for the fence every time. But that's okay. He's a rookie, right? He'll get better. When the Pirates call him up, they put him in center field, and it doesn't go well. Bob Walk says that Bonds was, quote, truly horrible. And by this point, as Steve kind of alluded to, they've hired a manager named Jim Leland, and Leland keeps wanting Bonds to play deep, but Bonds keeps ignoring those instructions, and then a bunch of balls keep going over his head. That are fly balls that he seemingly could have caught had he been playing deeper. Some of the Pirates players start feeling like he's a little disrespectful or arrogant because, again, he's a rookie and the manager's saying do this and he's not doing it. There was a guy on the Pirates that year, shortstop named Ewell Washington. He says, quote, Barry rubbed everybody on that team the wrong way. And to this day, Ewell Washington recalls asking Barry Bonds as a rookie, hey, can you loan me a bat? And Bonds reportedly said, sorry, dude, I've only got 7 left.
Wow. Only 7, huh?
Yeah. Logan Easley, who was one of the relief pitchers on that 86 Pirates team, says, none of us trusted him. If a guy's on second base and the ball's hit to you, at least try throwing him out at home. Give it some effort. I mean, that's my flip and run that just crossed the plate. But Barry was more concerned about his arm looking bad than he was winning a game. So that's just initial impressions of center fielder rookie Barry Bonds. There is a game late in the season where Bonds hits a home run off of Phillies closer Steve Bedrosian in the bottom of the 9th inning to win the game. And that's kind of a big moment because Steve Bedrosian in that era was a Cy Young Award winner and was a really good closer. And so that was kind of, Barry had a flair for the dramatic right away. Afterwards, of course, he hits the bottom of the 9th home run. So there's a bunch of reporters around Barry Bonds' locker. Well. Yeah. But he's eating his post-game meal and Barry Bonds yells, move, word I can't say that starts with M, and says, do I come to your house at supper time and bother you? And I'll get the F out of my house. And several of the Pirates coaches and teammates say they're really horrified by that. They can't believe that a rookie is talking to the media like this. So even as a rookie, Barry Bonds is already starting to make people dislike him. There is, though, a side that Bonds had that not many people saw. So this is a pretty interesting story. So in the offseason that year, in January, Rich Donnelly, I don't know if you remember Rich Donnelly, Steve, but he was
he was pitching coach or
third base coach under Leland for years. I think he followed him too, like other places that Leland went.
Yeah.
He asked if Barry Bonds would help. He's running a youth baseball clinic in a rural high school in West Virginia. And he offers Barry Bonds a $500 appearance fee, which, I mean, even in 1987 probably isn't a ton if you're a Major League Baseball player. But he's pretty surprised that Bonds says yes. But then on the morning, again, this is January, on the morning of the event, there was a huge snowstorm. So Donnelly arrives at this rural school in West Virginia at 8 a.m. and he goes to the principal's office and he says, "Hey, there's a snowstorm. This Barry Bonds isn't going to be showing up." And he's really surprised when the principal says, "What are you talking about? Barry Bonds is in the gym talking to the kids right now." And Bonds stays there for 4 hours. He doles out all kinds of autographed bats and gloves. And before he leaves the school, he goes up to Rich Donnelly and he hands him the $500 appearance fee check. And he says, "Hey, do me a favor, keep this and write it over to the athletic fund here instead." And Rich Donnelly said, "That's a side of Barry I'd never seen before. It's weird, but I don't think he wants many people to see it. It's his little secret, and he doesn't need it in the clubhouse." And Jim Leland said, "Underneath all that toughness, I know what a big heart there is. I know the things that Barry has done for kids and different charities, things he did for people that a lot of people never knew about. I saw a side of Barry that some people to this day still haven't seen." In 1987, before the season starts, the Pirates make a big trade, and they trade for a player by the name of Andy Van Slyke. And Andy Van Slyke and Barry Bonds dislike each other from the start. Bonds feels threatened because remember, Barry Bonds was the center fielder, and that's Andy Van Slyke's position. Andy Van Slyke thinks that Bonds is too cocky. Andy Van Slyke, also a guy, Steve, that was never afraid to speak his mind. And
Yeah, yeah.
you can just
Definitely got,
see
like,
the bad
there's gotta
mix,
be a
right?
friction. Yeah.
Yes. So about midway through that 1987 season, Jim Leland does make the switch to put Andy Van Slyke in center, and he moves Barry Bonds to left field, which ends up working much better defensively for Barry Bonds. 1987 is a pretty solid season for Barry Bonds. He gets his average up to 261. Remember, he was like a 220 hitter the year before. He hits 25 home runs. 25 home runs was a lot for the late 1980s.
Yeah, when you would hit 30, that was like a good year.
Yes.
Really good year.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think there was a gap of I want to say like 10 years where nobody hit more than 50. So yeah, 25 was a lot. He also steals 32 bases. The 1987 season, Steve and I remember this probably very well because it was the first time we had ever gotten excited about the Pirates after years and years of them being bad.
Yeah.
They go 27-11 over the final 6 weeks of the season. They win 80 games for the first time in 4 years, and they draw more than 1 million fans to Three River Stadium. Now
they went from like last place to like third place or
fourth,
like
fourth place. So you look at the standings, 80 and 82 in fourth place. If you just looked at that like on a piece of paper, you'd think that's not a very good season.
But it was because they started out. I remember because I went to a lot of games that year, that summer, and they were bad like the first half of that season. And then the second half, they just absolutely turned it on. I don't know if the pitching clicked or what, but they definitely could hit. I think the hitting clicked is the main thing. They started to be able to hit.
Yeah, it was one of those things where you're like, oh, we actually might have something here, right? And could they carry that in the future seasons? So in the off season between 87 and 88, Barry Bonds gets married to a woman named Sun Bronco, who he met at a strip club in Canada where Sun Bronco worked. They get married before the season.
That's definitely where you go to meet a future wife, for sure.
But yeah, I mean, right. Not the gym or the grocery store, church, or
just
whatever.
A friend of a friend. Yeah. No.
Yeah, right. Strip club.
Like Willie Mays couldn't, steer him.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't. It's not like they had Match.com back then, Steve. So you had to do what you had to do, I guess.
Yeah. Sun Bronco, huh?
Yeah. Well, she'll factor in later. Apparently, Barry got a lot of flack from his teammates for marrying a woman that worked at a strip club. But the Pirates
that should help his relationship with his
team. Right. Yes. The 1988 season, they definitely carry over the momentum from the 87 season. They get off to a really hot start, and Barry Bonds gets off to a really hot start. Andy Van Slyke, this is a quote from the 1988 season. Andy Van Slyke says, "Barry Bonds has got a chance to be one of the top 5 players in the league. I can say that without question. In fact, I'll put it in gold letters, and you can put that in capitals." So Andy Van Slyke making a prediction there that Barry Bonds is going to be one of the top 5 players in baseball. And the Pirates and Bonds have a great 1988 season. They have this really fun pennant race with the Mets. They do finish in second place, but they draw a record-breaking 1.8 million
And
fans.
the Mets were a much better team. They just won the series the year before in '86 or what? No, this is '88.
2 years before.
And they
But
still
yeah,
have Doc Gooden and Darryl Strawberry,
Yes.
Wally Backman, all those like great players.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Pirates just, and I think they didn't get eliminated till like late August or September.
right. It was a pennant race all the way down to the end, and it was so exciting because, my goodness, the Pirates in a pennant race, and remember back then that meant a lot because
there was two divisions. There
Correct.
was the League Championship Series and World Series.
Yes.
That was it.
Yeah, they finished 85 and 75 that year. That would probably almost definitely get you into the playoffs today.
Yeah,
Back
I
then
think
it was
the
harder.
Mets won like 100 games or something that year.
Yeah.
They won. They were pretty good.
Right. So fun season, disappointing finish, but fun season, and it's a super young team. So what I think all of us as Pirates fans were thinking at the time is the best is yet to come. Barry Bonds, meanwhile, continues to distance himself more from his teammates. Andy Van Slyke says that, quote, Barry was simply inept with social situations. I think it was a condition that manifested itself because he never saw what it was to treat people with dignity. Bonds and Van Slyke also continue their frosty relationship. At one point, they get into a fist fight in the locker room with each other.
Wow, I
And
didn't know that.
and Brian Fisher, who's one of the pitchers, says,
I remember him.
Yeah, I remember him too. Yep.
Yeah.
He says it was the funniest thing he ever saw because as they're getting into a fight, a bunch of teammates came rushing the Van Slyke's defense, but nobody really stood up for Bonds. So not a popular guy. But conflicts aren't limited to teammates and Pirate legends. Bonds also starts to tick off a bunch of fans. There's a game at Three River Stadium that year against the Mets. Like we said, they were in a pennant race with the Mets. So that was a big game. And as Bonds enters Three River Stadium, there's a group of kids waiting to get his autograph. And Bonds reportedly says, quote, F off, F off, F off, F off.
A bunch of kids?
To a bunch of kids. Pirates
wow.
outfielder.
Just just walked past and not said anything.
Right.
Wow.
Right. Pirates outfielder, another guy you might remember, Steve, RJ Reynolds.
Yeah, I met RJ Reynolds.
Oh,
at when I was a kid, like at like a clinic, baseball clinic.
He didn't tell you to F off, did he?
RJ Reynolds?
Yeah.
No, he was actually very nice.
Okay. Well, that makes sense because RJ Reynolds sees this and he lambasts Bonds in front of everybody. And he says, quote, be a bleeping man, Barry, treat people with dignity. Things start to turn ugly with his wife too. So Son Bronco says, quote, he always told me that I was too opinionated, that I didn't need to have an opinion. He said he was the man in the house and I should shut up.
Well, that's one way to run a house.
Yeah, it is.
I wonder how that's gonna. Let's say how's that gonna work out there for good old Barry?
Yeah,
I get the feeling Son Bronco is going to be very well off in the near future.
Yeah. Yeah, she also calls police, tells police that following a dispute about birth control pills, Barry Bonds grabbed her around the neck, kicked her, and threw her down the stairs. So again, that's obviously those things are always a he said, she said kind of thing.
Now I've never heard anything like that about Barry. Just that he's a jerk, unless it was swept under the rug for all those years.
Yeah, I mean it's in a police report.
This is still kind of early in his career in the '80s, so
yep,
it was easier to sweep things.
It was.
Rug there.
It was. One friend that Barry has on the team, here's another name, Steve, if you remember, is utility outfielder John Cangelosi.
He gets along with John Cangelosi.
Yeah.
Of all the people in
of
the
all
world.
the people, yeah. It's
well,
an
maybe
odd
there is
pairing.
something to that RJ Reynolds thing then.
Yeah. Yes.
Describe John Cangelosi for the people that don't.
I mean, John Cangelosi was not he didn't look like an athlete, right?
Yeah, he was like a short little white guy.
Yes.
Like
yes.
Yeah. He was a decent player. I wouldn't say he was like he was a major leaguer. He wasn't like going to be in the Hall of Fame or anything or make an all-star team.
Who was that linebacker for the Steelers? Robert Spillane. He was Robert Spillane.
Yeah.
Really didn't belong there, but hustled enough where he could make some plays and you could put him into the game. But yeah, that's
Yeah, if
Barry
he
Bonds'
needed him,
strength.
he would normally come through for
Right,
you.
right.
Yeah.
That's the perfect description. John Cangelosi says, quote, "Is he moody? Yes. Was he dumb in the way he worked the press? No question. But if you get inside, you'll see the compassion that he has." And John Cangelosi said he wasn't afraid to tell Bonds the truth. He said, "You're a great player, but that doesn't give you the right to treat people like poop."
Yeah.
Well, he didn't
Yeah.
say poop.
Yeah.
The Pirates at this point know that Bonds is a head case, so they actually start talking to the Atlanta Braves about making a trade. The general manager of the Braves at this time is a guy named Bobby Cox.
Yeah. He hasn't started managing yet, huh?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And at the time, he offers Andres Thomas for Barry Bonds, and at the time, if you remember, the Pirates were in like shortstop hell for about 4 years in the late '80s. This is before
I
Jay
don't know. I
Bell.
like Sammy Khalifa.
Yeah. They had Sammy Khalifa, Al Pedrique, who else? Felix Fermin. Remember him?
Felix Fermin.
Yeah.
I remember they used to play Felix the Cat theme song.
Yes.
When he
So
couldn't hit, and he wasn't a very good fielder.
no,
And neither
so,
could Sammy Khalifa.
No.
I remember in the paper they called Sammy Khalifa the shortstop of the future.
Yes, they did. They did. He
was
even had the
not.
tops. He even had the tops trophy on his 1988 Topps card.
Future prospect.
But
I wonder where Sammy Khalifa is now.
I don't know, but none of those guys worked out. And Andres Thomas was not a star player, but he was a stable shortstop. And the Braves say, "Hey, we'll give you Andres Thomas, and the Pirates say, "Okay, if you throw in Jeff Blauser, we'll trade you Barry Bonds." And Bobby Cox says no.
Sounds like Bobby Cox made a mistake.
You think? I mean, think about the Braves of the '90s.
Jeff Blauser.
For Jeff Blauser and Andres Thomas could have had Barry Bonds on that team with all that pitching.
Yeah, and they needed hitting. They always needed a little.
Yep.
Well, they would have had him and Justice.
Yeah, and Ron Gant and Terry Pendleton. Yeah, they would have been okay. I'm going to say they would have been pretty good.
Yeah.
The Pirates then try to swing a trade with the Dodgers and later the Blue Jays, who reportedly offer 7-time All-Star pitcher Dave Stieb, but none of those pan out either. So 1989 comes and Barry's still on the team, and that was not a good season for the Buccos. What I remember about that season, Steve, was 87. They Well, oh yes, okay. Two things I remember about that season. So yes, the Jim Rooker game that we talked about in a recent episode, where Jim Rooker had to walk home from Philadelphia because they blew what was it, a 10-run lead?
10-run lead, yeah.
Yeah. But
giving up 2 home runs to Steve Jeltz, and Barry Bonds' quote on Steve Jeltz was "Steve effing Jeltz."
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Just to tie it in back into Barry there.
I totally left that off, so thank you for reminding me of that.
Yeah.
And that season, that was a real disappointment because 87 they got hot at the end of the year. 88 they had a pennant race. They almost won the division, and then 89 they took a huge step back. They finished 5th in the division. And then you're kind of wondering, I thought this team was hitting their stride, and they finished 5th. Van Slyke is a free agent entering that season, and the Pirates reward him with a huge contract, which pisses off Bonds, especially after Andy Van Slyke has a subpar 89 season after getting that big contract. So now we go into the 1990 season, and that starts off with a bang because Bonds loses an arbitration hearing. And one of the reasons why, so Steve, can you describe like what an arbitration hearing is in baseball?
Wow. I'm not even sure how. I mean, I think they have. Is it a 3-panel board? They have like a person from the league, a person from the team, and like a separate union person.
Well, they have an arbitrator making the decision, right?
Yeah. So it's like you get up there and you say, oh, okay, like the team has to talk bad about their own players. Right. Normally the bad stuff that happens is like, oh, Barry Bonds struck out like 200 times, and we're comparing him to, who's a big time? Tim Raines, I don't know, or Andre Dawson or somebody like that was big back then. Well, he isn't hitting as well as these guys, so that's why we're offering him this salary. And if you take it personally, like I can't imagine Barry Bonds would take that personally. But
Yeah.
you can really, you just got to realize that's business. And when you hit a bunch of home runs, like let's say you have a season where you hit 70 home runs, that's when you go back and you renegotiate your contract and say, I hit 70 home runs and packed your stadium out all season. Okay, how much money are you going to give me?
Yes.
That's kind of how the way the world works.
Yep. That's a perfect description. And sure enough, like you said, the Pirates get up there and they make the argument that their big argument is Barry Bonds didn't drive in as many runs as the other players in baseball who made the amount of money that Bonds wanted. So they really focus their argument around RBIs. Well, the Pirates, I don't think we'd mentioned this, but up until this point in his career, Barry
He's
Bonds
batting
is
leadoff.
he's the leadoff hitter.
Yeah, so he's not going to get RBI.
He's not going to get
Yeah,
RBIs.
yeah.
Of course not. That was
Yeah.
his 4 seasons with the team. He's batting.
I mean, unless
leadoff.
John Cangelosi's batting ninth, then you never.
Yeah, as long as he's pinch hitting. So I mean, I can see being a little upset about that. It's a little bit of a dirty tactic by the team. And remember too, this is the era where you still had collusion and other kind of low ball tactics by the MLB owners. So I can certainly see, like you said, Steve, you have to understand it's a business. I can see this rubbing you the wrong way a little bit. Bonds openly complains in the media via his agent. His agent says, quote, Barry doesn't want to be a part of the Pirates anymore. If he could be gone tomorrow, he would be happy. Well, regardless, the 1990 season becomes the year where Barry Bonds goes from, pretty good player to just bona fide superstar. He becomes the first major leaguer in history to have a 300 batting average, 100 RBIs, 100 runs, and 50 stolen bases in the same season. And he also hits 33 home runs just for good measure.
That's an awesome season.
Yeah. He's named the National League MVP. The Pirates put it all together as a team as well. And after a memorable pennant race again with the Mets, they win the NL East and they advance to the NLCS against the Cincinnati Reds. So they're playing the Reds in the NLCS. Cincinnati has a really good team that year, but the Pirates,
wire, man.
Yeah, they were wire to wire. Yep, they never were not in first place. But the Pirates, they have the best player in baseball. But unfortunately, Barry Bonds crumbles under the pressure of the playoffs. He hits 167 in a 6-game series, 0 home runs, and the Pirates lose in those 6 games. Now, to be fair, Bobby Bonilla, guy we haven't mentioned yet, but who is probably the second best player on the team, and Andy Van Slyke also didn't do well. They both hit around 200. Yeah. But Barry Bonds is the league MVP, right?
You would expect a little bit more out of him. But the Reds were really good that year. They had I forget who their starting pitching was really good. They had Rob Dibble out of the bullpen.
Yeah.
Yep. They were really good that year.
They were really good. But 167 for the league MVP. It just wasn't.
Large shot as an owner.
So. They did. Bonds also ticks off a lot of people by publicly calling out third baseman Jeff King for not playing through an injury during the series. He actually, in the media, kind of insinuates Jeff King should be playing and he's not. So that's not good. This is also the season where the economics of baseball really start to catch up with the Pirates. The team loses approximately $5 million in 1990. So the Pirates are playing in kind of a decaying market. After that 1990 season, Bonds still upset about his contract, still talking about wanting to play somewhere else. And it really irritates him when Doug Drabeck and Andy Van Slyke both get more money. And then Barry Bonds, for the second straight year, loses his arbitration case. Bonds at the time says, quote, the Pirates can't keep crying broke. You can't own half of Pittsburgh and say you're on welfare. And he says, if I do leave, I'll haunt the Pittsburgh Pirates. They'll be the one team I beat up on. And once again, Steve, that does not go over well with the local fans.
And, it's funny because Peyton Manning said the same thing and is revered for it. And Barry Bonds basically said the same thing that Peyton Manning said 7 years later.
Yep. There's definitely some double standards. But again, think about how Peyton Manning treats people versus how Barry Bonds treats people.
His brother flips people the double bird whenever.
He does, yeah. Gene Collier, who, if you're from here, you probably recognize that name. He was a columnist for the Pittsburgh Press, who had a very, what would you say, Steve, dry sense of humor, or sarcastic?
Yeah, sarcastically dry.
Yeah.
Kind of thing going on.
Yeah. He writes a column at the time. He says, quote, if Judgment Day were tomorrow, you get the feeling that the official agenda would be Hitler, Saddam Hussein's treatment of the Kurds, and then Barry Bonds' poor, unfair contract situation. So there's that. Barry's frustration spills over into spring training and the now infamous incident that we've talked about before with the cameraman. So they're at spring training down in Florida. There's a press photographer taking pictures because that's what press photographers' job is, to take pictures of ball players. And for some reason on that day, Barry Bonds gets very angry that somebody's taking pictures. And he tells the photographer to, quote, "Get the F out of my face." He also gets into it with Bill Verdon, who is the former Pirate legend, who's a hitting coach in 1991.
Also coached the Yankees.
Also coached the Yankees. Also a guy that Steve met.
Yes, I did.
Jim
guy.
Leland.
I think I met him. That might have been that season too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
You should have asked him about Barry Bonds.
I was like, what was it? 90? I was like 13, 12 or 13.
Yeah. Yeah. Jim Leland comes over and starts screaming at Bonds. He says, "Sir, I am the manager of this team, and if you don't want to be here, then kindly exit the premises." It's all captured
You
by...
good sir have offended me for the last time.
Yeah. Of course, it's a little more rough language than that. It's all captured by a TV station from Altoona, and the clip goes like 1991 viral. Because it really does.
It made the 6 o'clock news.
But it got played a lot. I mean, you couldn't avoid that. I mean, you saw that everywhere for a long time, and we can't play it on this podcast because it's pointless. It's like Barry bleep 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 bleep. No, I did bleep bleep bleep. I mean, it's just, you can't hear anything unless somebody has the unbleeped out version, which we're not going to play here. But we'll post the link to it anyway. That
the censor guy earned his keep.
Yeah. So Leland screams at Bonds. Bonds screams at Leland and Verdon. It's pretty ugly. Bonds has recently signed an endorsement deal with Pepsi, and after this video goes, like I said, viral for that era, Pepsi says, we don't really want to work with Barry Bonds anymore, and they canceled the deal. So it ends up costing Bonds money. Wow. Yep.
I didn't realize all this went on with him.
For sure. And to your point about the awareness, it's when you're in that position and things are going south like that, you can kind of take two roads, right? You can do some self-reflection and say, maybe I need to do some things differently. And maybe you can even say, maybe things are stacked against me, but maybe some of the way I'm treating people or the way I'm handling things is part of that. Or you could just go full blast and blame everybody else. And that's what Bonds does with this incident in Florida.
He kind of doubles down on all that. Yeah,
he does. And then he actually, I didn't realize this, Steve, but he later accuses the Pirates of setting that whole thing up.
Oh my goodness. Okay. That's just ridiculous.
He says, quote, why would a microphone and a TV crew be right there at that time just to stir up stuff?
They're getting like B-roll for like, oh, here's spring training and the Pirates, and look, here's them. They're just going to show B-roll over like a standard. Oh, this year the Pirates hope to, capitalize on last year's, almost, division. Come on.
Well, and if there's one thing about the local media, they love them some Pirates spring training and Steelers training camp. I mean, there are so many stories.
Yeah, what else is going on in February in Pittsburgh?
And you get a free trip to Florida. Like this is a TV station from out.
And what else is going on in late July after the Pirates have been mathematically?
That's exactly right. And this was a TV station from Altoona. I mean, they're getting a free trip to Florida. Of course, they're going to take that, and they're going to, like you said, film stuff. Bond says, quote, the funny thing is, my dad told me before I went to spring training, they're going to set you up when you get there. And he was right. The 1991 season starts and the Pirates put together, I would argue, the 1991 Pirates are the best Pirates team since the 79 World Series champions. Now, to be fair.
Well, that means they're going to win a World Series. For sure.
Well, and to be fair, it's not like there's a bunch of Pirates teams to pick from in that list. There's probably 5 or 6. However, it's a really good team. Van Slyke says it's the most talented team he ever played on. just an absolute stacked lineup that wins 98 games. That's the best record in all of Major League Baseball. They become the first National League team in 13 years to repeat as division champion. I mean, that's pretty big, right? So the National League had 2 divisions, and it at this point, 13 years ago would have been the late 70s. That's the first time anybody ever repeated as a division champion in 13 years. Meanwhile, George Steinbrenner repeatedly tries to acquire Bonds in a trade, but the Pirates say no. I guess Costanza wasn't there yet to figure out some good trade
Bonds and
packages.
Gray were not so much, huh?
Right.
That's why that is a puddle water drinking.
Bonds and his wife also have their first child that season, and there's stories in the
Is
media
he
that
still
year-
married to the lady from
He's
Canada?
at this point, yes, he is.
Okay.
And there are stories in the media that year about like a kinder, gentler Barry Bonds. Even some of his teammates say that he seems a lot nicer and calmer, and a lot of people attribute that to him being a father. This season is when Barry Bonds kind of has his marquee Pirates moment. So on August 12th, 1991, the Cardinals, who we talked about, come to Three River Stadium. They're right behind the Pirates in the NL East standings at this point.
Game. Yeah.
The Pirates take a lead. I'm sorry, the Cardinals. The game goes into extra innings. The Cardinals take a lead in the top of the 11th. In the bottom of the 11th, Bonilla gets on first, and that brings up Barry Bonds against Hall of Famer Lee Smith. By the way, I don't think we mentioned it, but the season before this, the Pirates started batting Bonds 5th after Bonilla. And that's really when he started to take off offensively, when he got him out of the leadoff spot. So here he is in the bottom of the 11th inning against Cardinals reliever Lee Smith, who, like we said, is a Hall of Famer, and who's in 1991 is in his prime. He actually finished his second in the National League Cy Young voting that year. So a tough at bat. Here's what happens. Yeah, so Barry Bonds cranks a home run into right field. It's kind of a memorable moment because after he hits the ball, Steve, he just drops the bat and he just kind of sticks both arms up in the air. It's a moment that gets replayed a ton.
Yeah, and that was in like commercials and stuff. And
yeah,
it's a pretty cool clip.
Yeah,
that's probably the highlight of those Pirate seasons, of all 3 seasons, I would say.
It probably is. Yeah, it probably is, because it's Barry Bonds being clutch like the star player should be. Bonds has a great season in 1991. He probably should be the MVP again, but the voters give it to Terry Pendleton. And if you look at the stats, Bonds he's actually 2 whole wins above replacement more than Pendleton. He has a better on-base percentage. He has more home runs, more RBIs. But, these awards, like we've talked about before, whether it's the Heisman Trophy or the Hart Trophy or whatever, they really come down to popularity contests. And Terry Pendleton's a likable guy with a great comeback story, because he was a veteran that was kind of like had flamed out, and then he had this great season. And Barry Bonds is a jerk. So Terry Pendleton's the MVP, not Barry Bonds. But regardless, all that bodes well for the Pirates heading into the NLCS against the team that Terry Pendleton plays for, the Atlanta Braves. And the Atlanta Braves of this era, their strength is that they have a bunch of really good pitchers. Right before game 1 of the NLCS, Bonds inexplicably does an interview where he rips into the Pirates again over his contract. And he talks about how he's the best player in baseball. And that's when he makes...
remember this interview.
Well, that's when he makes the infamous Great White Hope comment about Andy Van Slyke. He basically says Andy Van Slyke can do no wrong. He's the Great White Hope around here. And once again, rubs a lot of people the wrong way, basically saying that everybody likes Andy Van Slyke because he's white. Nobody likes Barry Bonds because he's black. And also he's the best player. And the Pirates suck for not giving him a new contract. This is before game 1 of the NLCS, Steve. Once again, Barry Bonds chokes in the playoffs. In 1991 NLCS, he goes 4 for 27, 0 home runs, 0 runs batted in. Of the Pirates' 8 starting position players in the 1991 NLCS, Steve, guess where Barry Bonds finishes?
I'm going to guess dead last.
Yeah. He finishes 8th in batting of their 8 starting position players. Literally, He is their
Behind
worst
Jose
hitter.
Leaned and people like that. Jeez.
Yes.
Wow, that's not good. Well, that's probably why the Pirates lost, I guess.
The real defining moment in that series comes in Game 5, which is a game that the Pirates win 1-0. The Braves, twice in that game, intentionally walk Bobby Bonilla so that they can face Barry Bonds. That's how much confidence Atlanta has that Bonds, they had him completely psyched out. The Pirates have a 3-2 lead in that series, with Game 6 and Game 7 being played in Pittsburgh, but they cannot score a run in either of those games. And once again, they watch someone else go to the World Series instead of them. And we'll get to the 92 season, and obviously we all know how that ended. But I think we all forget how disappointing that ending was in 91, because they were coming back to Pittsburgh.
All they do is win a 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not only do they lose, they
I don't
get
think they
shut
get
out.
blown out either. Weren't they like 3-0 or
The Game 6 was 1-0, so it was literally 1-0, and then yes, Game 7 I think was 3-0.
Wow.
So it wasn't like 11-5 or something, right? It wasn't like this offensive explosion by the Braves, but it was enough. It was enough. The pitching, just Steve Avery pitched Game 6, and I believe Glavine pitched Game 7, and they couldn't hit the Atlanta pitchers. It was a bummer, because again, that 91 team was really good. Going into the next season, 1992, had a real sense of doom around it right from the start. Bobby Bonilla leaves that offseason to sign a huge free agent deal with the Mets, which of course the Mets, that was such a great signing for them that they, never regretted.
Don't worry, July 1st, they're still going to be paying for it.
The Pirates also, they had a pitcher named John Smiley, who was a 20-game winner in 91. And they like unceremoniously just dump him to Minnesota for like nobody. And then Drabek and Bonds are both entering the final year of their contracts. So even before that season began, I remember thinking like, well, this is it, right?
Yeah.
If they don't win this season, then it's the end of this era. And Bonds, he continues to be Barry Bonds. He dumps his agent, that guy Rod Wright, the guy who had come out in the media and said all the stuff about Barry doesn't want to be here anymore. And that was a big deal, because Rod Wright had been Bobby Bonds' agent and was a close family friend of the Bonds family. And Rod Wright says he was incredibly hurt from that. He says, quote, "If someone gets too close like I did, he automatically backs away. It's a terrible way to go through life, but it's who he is." Barry Bonds continues to dominate at the plate, though. He hits .311, 34 home runs, 103 RBIs, 39 stolen bases, and wins his second National League MVP trophy in 3 years. Like we said, probably should have won 3 in a row, but that time they couldn't take it away from him. It was just too dominant. And the Pirates are once again going to play the Braves in the NLCS. By this point, Bonds has already been labeled as a choker, right? Because he had choked the previous 2 years. Fans say he chokes even around baseball. Darryl Strawberry has this quote at the time, Steve. He says, quote, "He's not done anything in the postseason. He's a joke." That was Darryl Strawberry, who was another guy that was never afraid to speak his mind and who people generally didn't like a whole lot. But even the fans are not real excited. I don't know why this sticks with me, Steve, but the night of Game 1 of the 92 NLCS, I had to go get my hair cut. And the lady cutting my hair, I just remember her saying, oh, playoffs start tonight, Game 1. And I just was like, yeah. I remember like I was like, they're gonna lose again, right? Like everybody just was like, they're gonna lose again. And no one's real excited. I don't know if you remember feeling that way, Steve.
I remember felt like this is it, and they're probably not going to be very good after this.
Yeah. Prior to the start of that series, Bonds makes another now infamous quote where he says, quote, "I told my teammates I'll get you to the playoffs. Now they've got to get me through the playoffs, and I'll see that we win the World Series." And people say he was supposedly joking about that, but who knows with this guy, right? But a lot of people took that the wrong way. Like, I'll get you to the playoffs, but now you've got to win it for me. It's like, what? You're the best player, right? So if that was meant to be a joke, no one took it as a joke. And sure enough, that sense of doom that 15-year-old me had at the haircut place is warranted, because the Braves win 3 of the first 4 games, and Bonds, as usual, can't hit anything. He even gets booed by the crowd at the River Stadium after striking out with men on base. And for all the external talking and treating people like garbage, Bonds is reportedly really distraught at this point. Like he really wanted to win. And Leland says he tries to give him a pep talk. And then Bobby Bonilla, who remember at this time is playing for the Mets, he even flies into Pittsburgh to try to comfort Bonds and say, hey, series isn't over. You guys still have another game. You can do this. And something does click because Bonds has 2 hits and he makes a diving catch in game 5, which the Pirates win to stay alive in the series. And then in game 6, Barry Bonds hits a home run. Believe it or not, the all-time home run hitter finally hits a home run in the postseason. That was in the first inning, and it paves the way for a 13-4 Pirates blowout, which sets up game 7 in Atlanta. All the momentum has shifted to the Pirates. This is it. It's finally going to happen. Barry Bonds has shed all his playoff demons. He's going to take this team to the World Series. Doug Drabick's on the mound. He throws a masterpiece for 8 innings. The Pirates go into the bottom of the 9th with a 2-0 lead, and we all know what happens next. I'm going to just recap it very quickly because my emotions can't handle another detailed dive into this. Basically, some guys get on base. Jose Lean makes an untimely error. A guy named Francisco Cabrera gets a game-winning hit, and former Pirate Sid Bream beats a Barry Bonds throw from left to send the Braves to the World Series. Like I said, I'm not going to go into detail, way too painful. But I will say on that throw that Sid Bream was trying to score on, Bonds has positioned himself deep in left field because he didn't want a fly ball to go over his head. Maybe that's like from earlier in his career when Barry Bonds kept telling him to play back because there were 2 outs. If Cabrera hits a fly ball and Bonds catches it, then game's over. Van Slyke reportedly tells Bonds, no, move in case he hits a ground ball so you can throw the guy out. Bonds reportedly gives Van Slyke the middle finger because he's not going to listen to Eddie Van Slyke tell him how to play left field. It's very appropriate that the final Barry Bonds' final ever moment as a Pirate is that play. There was no bigger gut punch in the 90s or in the history of Pittsburgh sports than Sid Bream sliding across home plate. There just isn't. It's beyond painful, and that's it.
Well,
that's it for the
literally
Pirates.
I think it literally took like just the city to like recover from that sports wise. It seemed like it took us forever.
So let's talk about the aftermath of all this. Bond signs a huge free agent deal with the San Francisco Giants, his father's team. The Giants end up offering $17 million more than what the Pirates offered, to which no one is surprised. Andy Van Slyke says, quote, the biggest travesty in the history of Pirate baseball is that they could have tied up Bonds and Bonilla back then for cheap money before they became free agents. They clearly had no vision of what the future of baseball was doing because of TV and how successful we could have been. We were young enough that we could have held on for 4 or 5 years more. And that is a travesty because that team was really good. And yes, they lost in 90, 91, 92. But to your point about the Braves, the Braves kept losing World Series, but then they eventually won one, or at least they were competitive for the whole rest of the decade. And that could have been the Pirates. That could have been Pirates Braves every year in the NLCS until we got to the end of the decade. And, we all know what happened next. Bonds ends up playing 15 more seasons and is roundly booed every time he comes back to play in Pittsburgh. I mean, that lasted for a long time, Steve, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I remember. Wasn't there an All-Star game? I remember he came out of the dugout and he kind of like ducked, like, "Oh, don't." That was 94.
94.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and he was kind of like, "Oh my gosh, don't boo me." And the boos I didn't think were that bad at that All-Star game.
Yeah, but I think whenever it was just Giants versus Pirates, people wouldn't hesitate to just he'd come up to bat.
He never won a World Series.
He never wins a World Series.
I don't think even in the postseason, its stats are still pretty poor. Like even when, because I think the Giants did make the postseason with him.
They did. I mean, they made a World Series in 2002, but they lost to the Angels. So he never does win a World Series and never really redeems that whole playoff choker status. We talked about him coming back to Pittsburgh and people being angry. One such return to Pittsburgh ends up being particularly ugly. So there's a guy named Pete Diana. Steve, I think you know who Pete Diana is, right?
He was a photographer of the Post-Gazette.
Yeah. Yeah, he was and he worked, yeah, like Steve said, mostly for the Post-Gazette. And basically, if you see like any kind of well-known picture of the Steelers, Penguins, or Pirates from the past 30 years, Pete Diana's probably the guy that took the picture, right? So on the morning of April 7th, 2002, two men, Joseph Lang and Paul Scott, they're groundskeepers at PNC Park. They're driving to the stadium when their car is broadsided by an SUV, and both of those guys, those groundskeepers, are tragically killed. Both guys had families, and neither had life insurance. So Pete Diana organizes a picture auction, a bunch of pictures, and the proceeds going obviously to the victims' families. And so whenever a team would come to town, the Pirates would go to the team, explain what had happened. This is a tragedy. And they would ask the star players from the opposing team, could you sign some of these photographs that we're trying to auction off to raise money for these families? And the Pirates say that so many teams were willing to help. Guys like Craig Biggio, Jeff Bagwell, Kurt Schilling, Randy Johnson. They said Sammy Sosa, in addition to signing pictures, he even sends over an autographed bat. Everybody was willing to, more than happy to help. When the Giants come to town, they ask Barry Bonds, and he reportedly says, "I ain't signing poop." Doesn't say poop. And this is Pete Diana reflecting on this incident. Quote, "The sad thing is, I knew he probably wouldn't sign, but we just thought, why not ask him since he played here and he knew these guys?" He says, "Look, I understand everybody wants something from Barry Bonds. That's why we were like, hey, these guys are dead. We're not making this up. But why should he take the time to help out a couple of families that lost their father and husband? Why should Barry give an F about anybody? Personally, I hope Barry Bonds dies."
Strong words.
Yep. So that's the kind of the effect, the Barry Bonds effect that he had on people. Well, let's end with this, because I think if there's any kind of like silver lining to the story, it's that Barry Bonds seems to have mellowed out and gained some new perspective in recent years.
When
When he was
trying to coach, yeah, I know that.
Yeah. And when he was asked who was to blame for his poor reputation in baseball, Bonds said, quote, "Me. It's on me. I'm to blame for the way I was portrayed because I was a dumbass. I was straight stupid, and I'll be the first to admit it. I was just flat out dumb. What can I say? I'm not going to try to justify the way I acted toward people. I was stupid. No one wants to be treated like that because I was considered to be a terrible person. You'd have to be insane to want to be treated like that. It makes no sense." So that's interesting. That's an interesting self-reflection. He also says,
so maybe
good.
finally gain some perspective there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's interesting because, again, remember, everything that happened was always somebody else's fault. Even the blow up with Jim Leland was that was a setup where they tried to get him to react so they could film it and broadcast it everywhere. And years later, he's saying it's all on him. So maybe some good growth there. He also says about his time with the Pirates, quote, "If it wasn't for the preparation I received in Pittsburgh, I don't think I would have been ready to succeed." He calls Jim Leland the best manager I could have ever had to start out my career. And he publicly thanks Bill Verdon for turning him into an 8-time Gold Glove winner.
Wow. Yeah, I know he always says real positive things about Jim Leland. He definitely respects Jim Leland. So
he does. And he speaks very fondly of the Pirates. So I don't know. I mean, I hope it sounds like, if you take those comments at face value, it sounds like he's maybe gone through a lot of personal growth and he regrets the way he acted and wishes he could do it differently. It's just, the whole thing's just a shame, Steve. Like you said, it's sad. Sad's the best word for it, because this was, you could argue that he was the best Pirate ever, right? He isn't, but he could have been. And it just all went south. It's just sad. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. Please check us out on the web, on Facebook or Twitter. There's a bunch of links if you go into the show description where you can find those. You can also contact us via email. And thank you. We'll catch you next time.